Greetings, this is Reverend Yue McCormick of True Vow Temple. Today I will be discussing the complexities of karma in light of the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. Before we get into the complexities of karma and rebirth, let's review the most straightforward picture of this process. Here is a picture of the Bhava Chakra, or Wheel of Becoming. It shows the 6 destinies or realms of rebirth. These are the realms of the hells at the bottom, the heavens at the top, the human realm, top left, the fighting demon or Ashura realm, top right, the hungry ghost realm, bottom left, and the animal realm, bottom right. None of these life conditions are permanent, though some last longer than others. A dung beetle's lifespan is very short, a human lifespan is a matter of a century and a couple of decades at most. Those in the heavens and hells may be in them for countless ages, but they too will pass from those realms to be reborn in one of the others. However, these states are also conditions of life that we pass through from moment to moment. All of them are bound up in suffering. In the hells, the suffering is at its most obvious. In the heavens, suffering is subtle. The other realms have more or less suffering. In any case, to remain within the 6 realms is like continuing to play a game of roulette. You may sometimes land in the human or heavenly realm, but you can never remain there. It is a game in which one can never really win. Which realm one falls into depends upon the nature of one's habitual patterns, whether wholesome or unwholesome. As the anonymous saying goes, we sow a thought and reap an act. We sow an act and reap a habit. We sow a habit and reap a character. We sow a character and reap a destiny. Here we must remember that karma means action. Karma is the action of making causes through our thoughts, words, and deeds. These actions are transmitted from moment to moment. Think of a Newton's cradle, wherein a moving ball on the end strikes a stationary ball, and the energy is transmitted through other stationary balls until it manifests visibly as the last ball of the series being pushed upward, which then falls back and repeats the process in the opposite direction. In the same way, the causes we make, whether wholesome or unwholesome, are an energy that is transmitted unseen through other moments, until the conditions are such that the effects of those causes are manifest in the type of realm we will experience, whether as a life condition here and now or in a future rebirth. In Newton's cradle, the energy is transmitted through steel balls. In the process of karma and rebirth, karmic activity is perpetuated and transmitted through consciousness, especially through the storehouse consciousness and the depths of our lives. I will not go into too much detail about the various kinds of good and evil deeds that will lead to the heavenly or hellish states respectively. I think it is enough to say that the Buddha taught that there are 10 good acts, or 10 courses of wholesome conduct, that one should follow in order to make the causes to be in the human or heavenly realm. These 10 good acts were probably not the Buddha's invention, for slight variations of them were taught by the Brahmins or Vedic priests of ancient India as well. These 10 are to abstain from killing, abstain from taking what is not given, and abstain from sexual misconduct, to abstain from lying, abstain from malicious speech, abstain from harsh speech, and abstain from idle chatter, and to abstain from covetousness, to abstain from ill will, and to abstain from wrong views. As we can probably see, the 10 good acts overlap a bit with the 10 commandments that we are familiar with from the Bible. Those who instead indulge in the 10 courses of unwholesome conduct by killing, stealing, etc., are making the causes to fall into the lower realms of the 6 realms, or paths of rebirth. An important thing to remember is that it is not simply what we do or do not do. The intention behind our actions is what makes an act a good or bad cause that will plant a seed in the depths of our lives that will someday come to fruition. While we must be mindful of what we say and do, the Buddha taught that we must especially be mindful of our intentions. Our minds are, in a sense, like a garden whose weeds and flowers are our intentions, attitudes, and habit patterns. It is our responsibility to weed this garden and to cultivate flowers and our medicinal herbs. It is simple enough to correlate the 10 kinds of unwholesome conduct with the eventual fruition of undesirable states on the one hand, and the 10 kinds of wholesome conduct with the fruition of desirable states on the other. In life, however, rewards do not always seem to come to the virtuous, nor does punishment always seem to come to the wicked. Life often appears unjust in its workings. In the discourse known as the Greater Exposition of Action discourse, the Buddha addresses why bad things sometimes happen to good people, while good things sometimes happen to bad people. The Buddha begins by outlining 4 different cases: one who commits unwholesome acts and is reborn in the lower realms, one who commits unwholesome acts but is reborn in the higher realms, one who commits wholesome acts but is reborn in the higher realms, and one who commits wholesome acts but is reborn in the lower realms. In the first case, someone with a divine eye or miraculous ability to see the rebirth of others might observe this and come to the dogmatic conclusion that one who performs such unwholesome deeds will always be reborn in a state of suffering or even in hell. In the second case, someone with a divine eye observing this might come to the dogmatic conclusion that such actions are not evil or that they do not lead to evil results. In the third case, someone with a divine eye might observe this and come to the dogmatic conclusion that one who performs good deeds will always be reborn in fortunate circumstances or even heaven. In the fourth case, someone with a divine eye might observe this and come to the dogmatic conclusion that such actions are not good or that they do not lead to good results. The Buddha rejects all these dogmatic conclusions because they all take a limited view of just 2 lifetimes. The Buddha points out that one must take a longer view. One cannot just observe what happens to someone within the short span of 1 lifetime or a single death and rebirth, and then jump to conclusions about the efficacy or inefficacy of good and bad actions. The ripening of karma is not always immediate. A cause may take lifetimes to come to fruition. It will also interact with other causes and conditions in the meantime. Those other good or bad causes may soften or strengthen the effect of that cause. So one cannot presume that the effects that are ripening in a person's life, or even the circumstances they were born into, are necessarily the result of immediately preceding causes. It is not so easy to trace the connections between causes and effects. So, for instance, a bad cause may seem to be rewarded, but the good fortune may be the fruition of a previous good cause. A good cause may seem to be punished, but the misfortune may be the fruition of a previous bad cause. Unless one sees the whole pattern of countless lifetimes, we cannot presume to know all the causes and conditions behind a particular rebirth or a particular situation. The Buddha pointed out that those who had the ability to know a few past lives jumped to conclusions based on their limited observations of a single lifetime or rebirth. They made mistaken assumptions about the nature of karma. They assumed that either karma would immediately reward the good and punish the bad, or that there were no rewards or punishments if they were not immediately forthcoming. With his much greater mastery of the divine eye to observe the passing and rebirth of countless beings, the Buddha taught that the unfolding of karma is much more complex, and its course is not so simple or predictable. The important lesson for us is that we should also not presume that our good conduct will always be immediately rewarded, nor should we presume that there are no past misdeeds that have not yet ripened into suffering. Good causes will not negate the retributions of bad causes, but neither do bad causes negate the rewards of good causes. Finally, according to this teaching, wrong views can lead even an otherwise good person into states of suffering, because they lead to confusion, clinging, anxiety, and despair at the moment of death. Only the cultivation of right view and all that follows from it, the cultivation of a life that is ethical, wholesome, and without bias, can truly lead beyond the entanglements of karma and its rewards and retributions. Another complication of the law of karma is that while it is true that a good cause cannot wholly negate a bad cause, nor a bad cause wholly negate a good cause, it is also true that the overall karmic pattern of a being provides a context in which good and bad causes may be felt more or less strongly. So the effect of an unwholesome action might be mitigated or offset by the effects of wholesome actions. On the other hand, the effects of a wholesome action might be diluted or offset by the effects of unwholesome actions. The Buddha therefore denies that a cause will rigidly give rise to a specific effect. Rather, the effect will emerge according to its kind, but in conjunction with a larger pattern of causes and conditions of which it is a part. The Buddha explains this by using the analogy of a salt crystal thrown into different bodies of water. He said, "Sometimes a minor bad cause leads to hell, but other times a minor bad cause done by someone else will briefly come to fruition here and now. For someone who has not developed themselves, a person lacking virtue and wisdom, the minor deed will lead to hell. For someone who has developed themselves and is usually virtuous and has wisdom, the minor deed will be experienced in the present lifetime and will be barely noticeable. The minor bad cause done by the unvirtuous and foolish person is like dropping a handful of salt into a small amount of water in a cup. The water in the cup will become salty and unfit to drink. But the minor bad cause done by the virtuous and wise person is like dropping the salt into the river Ganges. The river Ganges will not become noticeably saltier." Another complication that must be taken into account when considering the Buddha's teaching about the law of karma is that there are not only wholesome actions and unwholesome actions, there is also what the Buddha calls mixed actions that partake of both, and also a kind of activity that does not produce karma, but rather releases the doer from being bound by karma. At one time, the Buddha explained, there are 4 kinds of action proclaimed. There is dark action with dark result. There is bright action with bright result. There is dark and bright action with dark and bright result. And there is action that is neither dark nor bright, with neither dark nor bright result. Action that leads to the destruction of action. A dark action with a dark result is when someone makes bad causes of body, speech, and mind. This person then finds themselves in afflicted circumstances and undergoes painful situations. This is the situation with those in the hell realms. Thus I say, beings are the heirs of their actions. This is called dark action with dark result. A bright action with bright result is when someone makes good causes of body, speech, and mind. This person then finds themselves in unafflicted circumstances and undergoes pleasant situations. This is the situation with those in the heavenly realms. Thus I say, beings are the heirs of their actions. This is called bright action with bright result. A dark and bright action with dark and bright result is when someone makes causes that are mixed of body, speech, and mind. This person then finds themselves in circumstances that are in some ways afflicted and other ways not, and undergoes situations in which pleasure and pain are mingled. This is the situation with those in the human realms, as well as some of the gods and some of those in the lower realms. Thus I say, beings are the heirs of their actions. This is called dark and bright action with dark and bright result. And what is action that is neither dark nor bright with neither dark nor bright result? Action that leads to the destruction of action? Therein, the intention to abandon dark actions with dark result, bright actions with bright result, and actions that are dark and bright with dark and bright result. That is called action that is neither dark nor bright with neither dark nor bright result. Action that leads to the destruction of action. What is meant by abandoning action that is dark, bright, and both dark and bright? What is meant by the action that leads to the destruction of action? Here the Buddha is talking about achieving the 4 noble states that lead beyond the 6 paths or realms of the Wheel of Becoming. As long as we continue to play by the rules of the Wheel of Becoming, we will remain trapped in it, continually playing the roulette game of trying to gain benefit for ourselves and avoid misfortune. But none of the results can ever bring lasting happiness. Bad causes lead to the life conditions of the hells, hungry ghosts, and animals, while good causes lead to the life condition of heaven, while mixed causes, or the overall pattern of our lives of good and bad causes, lead to a life condition best represented by the human realm, the lower heavens, or the more tolerable aspects of the realms of the fighting demons, animals, and hungry ghosts. Even the good causes, however, only lead to conditional and impermanent happiness. As long as one chases them out of ignorance, one is also liable to mistakenly make mixed or even bad causes as well. The 4 higher realms, or noble states, do not make causes to avoid punishment or gain personal benefit. The first is the realm of the worthy ones, who hear the Buddha's teachings and do not play the game of avoiding misfortune and seeking personal benefit. The worthy ones can accept life just as it is and live with peace and equanimity. The actions, or causes, they make are to live a way of life that avoids conflict and harm, to cultivate a peaceful state of mind through meditation, and to gain insight into the true nature of things. The second noble state refers to those who contemplate the impermanent and interdependent nature of reality to gain peace and wisdom. They may do this on their own, through their own natural intelligence and sensitivity, even apart from the Buddha's teaching. The third noble state refers to bodhisattvas, or awakening beings who practice as the first 2 states, but with the motivation to attain Buddhahood and help all beings attain liberation from suffering. The 4th state refers to the Buddhas, or awakened ones, who have seen for themselves the true nature of reality, and whose activity is characterized by selfless compassion. The actions or causes of those in these 4 noble states can be said to destroy or negate the dark and bright actions, because they are not self-seeking activities that perpetuate the roulette wheel of the 6 lower realms. Their activity is transcendent and liberating. The 4 higher realms are different ways of coming to realize, or actively realizing, an unconditional happiness that can be shared with all beings. In surveying these discourses of the Buddha, it can be seen that the varieties and interweavings of karma and the ways in which they come to fruition can be quite complex. In fact, the Buddha listed the precise workings out of the results of karma as one of the 4 things that could bring about madness and vexation to those presuming to speculate about them without direct knowledge. There are these 4 unconjecturables that are not to be conjectured about, that would bring madness and vexation to anyone who conjectured about them. Which 4? The Buddhahood of the Buddhas is an unconjecturable that is not to be conjectured about. that would bring madness and vexation to anyone who conjectured about it. The experience of meditative absorption, of a person in meditative absorption. The precise workings out of the results of karma. Conjecture about the origin or the end of the world. These are all unconjecturables that are not to be conjectured about, that would bring madness and vexation to anyone who conjectured about them. The law of karma is not simply a tit-for-tat system of rewards and punishments, but an organic system whereby the circumstances, and even body and mind of beings, are the fruits of karmic seeds that they themselves have sown and continue to sow as they are confronted by and then react to the causes and conditions of life from moment to moment and lifetime to lifetime. While the givens and present circumstances have been, at least partially, determined by past actions, in each moment beings are free to either reinforce old patterns or forge new ones for better or worse. It is with this freedom to determine present actions that beings can bind themselves more closely to unwholesome patterns of cause and effect, or cultivate wholesome patterns of cause and effect, or attempt to free themselves from being bound by such karmic patterns altogether. Nichiren Buddhism teaches that all these realms or life conditions are part of every life and every moment. Every moment is also a moment of choice. We can give in to what we call the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion, and make the causes that will eventually manifest in the lower realms, or we can cultivate the 10 good acts by refraining from negative thoughts, words, and deeds, and instead cultivate loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity to manifest the human and heavenly realms. Or we can cultivate the 4 higher realms by learning and practicing the Buddha's teachings, contemplating the interdependent nature of reality, arousing compassion for all beings, and allowing ourselves to be awake to the true nature of reality, a nature that is characterized by selfless compassion. If we wish to find true liberty from the vicious cycle of the wheel of becoming, we should open our hearts and give thought to the wonderful Dharma as much as we can. In Nichiren Buddhism, we do this by chanting aloud the sacred title, which is Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, every morning and evening to begin and end the day, calling upon and making present to ourselves the presence of the true and original Buddha who transmits the wonderful Dharma to each of us in every moment. Throughout the day, we can chant aloud or silently to ourselves, as appropriate, to turn our minds away from negativity and affliction and towards the wonderful Dharma. In every moment, we can use this simple practice to put ourselves in touch with the true reality of all things, that is for us infinite life, light, love, and liberty. I now bring this talk to a close. I look forward to your questions and comments. May the merits of this talk on the Dharma extend universally to all, so that we and all living beings together accomplish the Buddha way.